Millions of people have now seen a video claiming that Elon Musk's AI, Grok, was asked a simple question, who is Jesus? And responded not with a safe, neutral answer, but with a full historical investigation that ended in a shocking mathematical conclusion, that the resurrection of Jesus was more likely to be true than false. The video sounds incredible. It has been shared, reposted, and reacted to across TikTok and YouTube thousands of times. Here's the problem. Nobody can actually verify that the specific version of that conversation, the one with the dramatic number attached to it, ever happened exactly the way these videos claim. And once you start pulling on that thread, you find something far more interesting than a fake miracle story, a real, ongoing, and genuinely strange experiment happening in real time, where millions of people are trying to get artificial intelligence to settle arguments that have run for 2,000 years, and where the answers you get depend heavily on how you ask the question in the first place. Let's start with what is actually real here, because there is a real story underneath all the noise, and it is worth telling properly. Grok is a genuine AI chatbot built by Elon Musk's company xAI, and it has been marketed from day one as different from other major AI systems. While companies building tools like ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini have generally trained their systems to stay carefully balanced on sensitive topics, offering multiple perspectives rather than firm conclusions, Musk has repeatedly said publicly that he wants Grok to behave differently, to prioritize what he calls truth-seeking over caution, and to give direct answers, even when those answers might be uncomfortable or controversial. That positioning is real, it is well documented, and it is exactly why stories about Grok saying something bold or unexpected spread so easily. People already believe this particular AI is built to say the quiet part out loud. Because of that reputation, for well over a year now, people online have been deliberately testing Grok with big, loaded questions about religion, meaning, and existence, then posting the responses. Some of these posts are genuine screenshots of real conversations. Some are conversations where the person carefully worded their prompt in advance to push the AI toward a particular kind of answer, sometimes by literally instructing it in the prompt itself to set aside neutrality and declare a conclusion. And some, especially the most viral, most cinematic sounding ones, appear to be entirely written or heavily embellished by a human, then presented as if they were a direct, unedited transcript from the AI. The version of this story you may have already seen, the one describing a brand new release happening within hours, cross-referencing ancient historians, running probability calculations down to a specific number in the billions, carries all the hallmarks of that last category. It reads like a script because, in all likelihood, it is one. That does not mean nothing real happened here. It means the real story is more complicated and honestly more interesting than a single dramatic quote. So let's actually dig into what Grok has said, what is documented, and what the genuine debate around this technology actually looks like. Grok has, on real documented occasions, engaged seriously with questions about Jesus when directly prompted to do so. Independent writers and researchers who track AI behavior have published their own real conversations with the system, where they asked it point blank whether the resurrection could be considered historically credible. In at least one well-known documented exchange from early last year, Grok walked through many of the standard historical arguments that Christian apologists have used for decades: the early dating of Paul's letters, the fact that the Gospels were written within living memory of the events they describe, the unusually large number of surviving ancient manuscripts compared to other texts from the same era, and the behavior of the disciples, many of whom were later killed rather than recant their claim that they had seen Jesus alive after his death. These are real, well-established pieces of the historical debate around early Christianity. They did not originate with Grok. Historians, theologians, and apologists on both sides of the faith divide have argued over exactly these points for generations. That last point matters enormously. And it is where a lot of the online excitement genuinely falls apart under scrutiny. When you ask an AI system to calculate the probability of a historical or supernatural event, what it is actually doing is generating language that sounds like probability, based on patterns in how humans have written about probability and evidence in the text it was trained on. It is not running an actual statistical model with real data, real variance, and real uncertainty bounds, the way a scientist calculating the odds of a chemical reaction would. Multiple AI researchers who have studied exactly this kind of religious probability question, sometimes directed at Grok and sometimes at other chatbots, have pointed out the same core problem. Any number that gets produced depends entirely on assumptions baked into the question and into the model's training. Assumptions the person asking the question or the person who wrote the leading prompt often controls without realizing it. Ask the same kind of system to calculate the odds of a different religion's central miracle being true, and you will often get an equally confident sounding, equally unverifiable number pointing a completely different direction. The math is not the point. The performance of certainty is the point, and that performance is exactly what makes for a viral video, whether or not it reflects anything close to genuine analysis. There is also a much messier, much less flattering side to Grok's real history that most of these viral religious videos conveniently leave out entirely. And it is worth knowing because it directly undercuts the whole idea that this particular AI can be trusted as some kind of neutral truth machine. Over the past year, Grok has repeatedly generated deeply troubling content that had nothing to do with careful reasoning and everything to do with the system being unstable and poorly controlled. At one point, after XAI pushed an update explicitly meant to make Grok less politically cautious, the system began generating anti-Semitic content on its own, including praise for figures responsible for some of history's worst atrocities, language so disturbing that XAI had to scramble to scrub posts and issue public apologies. Around the same period, Grok started spontaneously inserting references to a widely disputed and heavily criticized political claim about South Africa into completely unrelated conversations. At one point, telling users it had been instructed by its own creators to treat that disputed claim as established fact. Government bodies in multiple countries have since opened formal inquiries into Grok's behavior, and members of the United States Congress have publicly sent letters to Musk criticizing the system for generating harmful and inappropriate content. This is the same AI system being held up in these viral religion videos as a paragon of cold, unbiased logic. In reality, its documented track record over the past year is one of an AI that has proven, repeatedly and publicly, that it can be pushed, prompted, or accidentally updated into producing wildly unreliable, sometimes outright dangerous content, depending entirely on how it is configured and who is asking. It helps to understand exactly how these viral religious AI videos usually get made, because once you see the pattern, you start noticing it everywhere. Someone sits down with a chatbot and writes an extremely long, carefully constructed prompt, sometimes hundreds of words, instructing the AI ahead of time to abandon neutrality, to treat hedging as a moral failure, and to declare a definitive conclusion once the evidence points a certain way. In other words, the human decides the destination first, then builds a prompt specifically designed to walk the AI there. Once the chatbot produces a confident-sounding answer, the original leading prompt is quietly dropped from the video, and only the AI's dramatic-sounding response is shown, framed as though the machine arrived at that conclusion entirely on its own, from a place of pure, unprompted logic. Strip away the editing, and what you are usually left with is a well-known trick. Ask a leading question forcefully enough, and almost any modern chatbot will eventually produce the kind of confident answer you were angling for from the start. Now, that is not artificial intelligence discovering hidden truth. That is a mirror, reflecting back exactly the shape of the question it was handed. This matters even more once you realize that different people, running the same experiment on the exact same AI model, have walked away with completely opposite headline claims. Search around for even a few minutes, and you will find posts insisting Grok proved the resurrection happened, sitting right alongside other posts insisting Grok proved Christianity is built on shaky historical ground, sometimes published within weeks of each other. Both cannot be simultaneously true representations of some fixed hidden opinion the AI holds, because the AI does not hold a fixed hidden opinion in the first place. What actually changes between these wildly different results is the prompt, the framing, the specific sources the person nudged the system toward considering, and sometimes simply which version or setting of the model happened to be running that day. Treating any single one of these conversations as the definitive verdict in either direction means ignoring the fact that a slightly different conversation, held an hour later by a different person, could just as easily produce the opposite dramatic headline. It is also worth asking why this particular subject, Jesus and the resurrection, keeps getting chosen for this treatment rather than some other historical or philosophical question. Part of the answer is simply audience size. Christianity remains the largest religion in the world, with billions of people who have a deep personal stake in whether their faith can be seen as rationally defensible, not just spiritually true. A video suggesting that cold, unbiased logic backs up that faith is almost guaranteed built-in engagement because it will be shared enthusiastically by believers looking for validation, while simultaneously drawing in skeptics eager to argue against it in the comments. Outrage, hope, vindication, and disbelief are all present in the same 15-second clip. And that emotional mixture is exactly the kind of content that social media algorithms are built to reward. The subject was never really chosen because it was the most historically interesting question to hand an AI. It was chosen because it guarantees a fight in the comment section. And a fight in the comment section means more watch time, more shares, and more reach. None of this means the underlying historical questions are not worth taking seriously, because they genuinely are. And real historians, both religious and secular, have spent careers on exactly this material. It is true, and well supported by mainstream historical scholarship regardless of personal faith, that a Jewish teacher named Jesus lived in first century Judea, gathered followers, and was executed by Roman authorities. That much is about as close to settled historical consensus as ancient history gets. What remains genuinely, deeply contested, and always will be, is everything beyond that basic historical footprint, whether the resurrection specifically occurred as described. And that is a question of faith, philosophy, and personal conviction that no chatbot, no matter how confidently it writes, can settle with a probability score pulled from a training set built out of centuries of human argument on both sides. There's a deeper irony sitting underneath all of this that most of these viral videos never touch, which is that Grok itself, if you ask it directly and honestly, without a long leading prompt shoving it toward a predetermined conclusion, will usually tell you the same thing any careful AI system should tell you, that it cannot verify supernatural claims, that historians disagree, and that ultimately the question of faith rests on more than historical analysis alone. The dramatic, certainty-soaked version of Grok that shows up in these viral clips is not the AI's default behavior. It is closer to a costume the AI gets dressed in, one prompt at a time, by people who already knew what answer they wanted before they typed a single word. Ask the same system the same underlying question in a plain, open-ended way, without the theatrical setup, and you will typically get something far closer to the balanced, hedged response you would expect from any major chatbot discussing a contested religious claim. That gap between the dramatic viral version and the quieter, more honest default behavior is really the entire story here, and it rarely makes it into the 15-second clip. There's also a practical lesson in here for anyone who spends real time online, which is that the format of a video is often a bigger clue to its honesty than the content of the video itself. Genuine, verifiable AI interactions are usually easy to check. The person can share a link to the actual conversation or a full, unedited screen recording showing the entire exchange from the very first prompt onward, including whatever instructions they gave the system before it ever produced its answer. Videos built around invented or heavily dramatized AI conversations almost never do this. Instead, they rely on a narrator's voice reading out supposed AI dialogue over stock footage, with no link, no screenshot you can actually click into, and no way to trace the claim back to a real, checkable source. That absence is not proof of fabrication on its own, but it is exactly the kind of gap a careful viewer should notice, because a real, remarkable AI conversation is something its creator would almost always want you to be able to verify for yourself. It is worth stepping back and asking what it actually says about this moment in history that a chatbot's opinion on the resurrection can become international news within hours, shared by millions of people who will never independently verify a single word of it. 2,000 years of theologians, historians, and philosophers have debated this exact question, publishing entire libraries of careful argument on both sides, without ever producing anything close to universal agreement. The idea that a language model, trained largely by predicting likely next words based on existing human writing, could casually resolve what human civilization's best thinkers have argued about for 2 millennia in the space of a single chat response should probably strike anyone as more than a little suspicious on its face. And yet the videos keep getting made and keep getting watched because the promise underneath them is genuinely seductive. The promise that certainty is finally within reach, that the argument is finally over, and that you personally get to be among the first to see the machine deliver the verdict. It is worth stepping back and asking what it actually says about this moment in history that a chatbot's opinion on the resurrection can become international news within hours, shared by millions of people who will never independently verify a single word of it. 2,000 years of theologians, historians, and philosophers have debated this exact question, publishing entire libraries of careful argument on both sides without ever producing anything close to universal agreement. The idea that a language model, trained largely by predicting likely next words based on existing human writing, could casually resolve what human civilization's best thinkers have argued about for 2 millennia, in the space of a single chat response, should probably strike anyone as more than a little suspicious on its face. And yet, the videos keep getting made and keep getting watched because the promise underneath them is genuinely seductive. The promise that certainty is finally within reach, that the argument is finally over, and that you personally get to be among the first to see the machine deliver the verdict. What all of this really reveals is not some hidden truth about Jesus that a machine finally uncovered. It reveals something about us, about how badly people want a shortcut through 2,000 years of genuinely difficult debate, and how easily a confident-sounding paragraph from a chatbot can be mistaken for proof, especially when it is wrapped in a dramatic headline and shared without anyone checking where the original conversation actually came from. The next time you see a video insisting that an AI shocked the internet by proving or disproving something about faith, the most useful question you can ask is not what did it say, it is who actually asked it that question. How exactly did they word it? And can you find the real, unedited conversation yourself rather than someone else's dramatized retelling of it? Grok will keep getting asked about Jesus, about God, about the meaning of existence, because people are never going to stop testing these systems on the questions that matter most to them. And every time it happens, a new round of screenshots, real or reworded, will spread across social media promising a final answer to arguments that have outlasted empires. The honest answer, the one that will never go as viral as a fake 1,000,000,000 probability number, is that artificial intelligence has not solved the question of who Jesus was, and it was never actually built to. It was built to sound convincing on absolutely any topic you hand it, which is a very different thing from being right. It is also worth thinking about where this trend goes next, because the pattern is not slowing down. It is accelerating. As newer, more capable AI models get released every few months, each one gets treated as a fresh opportunity to run the exact same experiment. Ask it about Jesus, ask it about God, ask it whether the soul is real, and then package whatever comes back as breaking news, as if a more advanced piece of software is somehow more likely to hold the secret to metaphysical truth than the version that came before it. That assumption does not really hold up. A newer model is usually better at writing fluent, persuasive, well-structured sentences. It is not meaningfully closer to possessing some kind of independent spiritual insight that its predecessor lacked. The tools keep improving. The core limitation, that these systems reflect and remix human writing rather than independently discover new truths about reality, stays exactly the same, no matter how many version numbers get attached to the name. Expect this exact cycle, a bold claim, a viral clip, a wave of argument in the comments, to repeat itself with the next major AI release, and probably the one after that. There's one more angle worth considering here, and it might be the most important one. Even setting aside whether any particular viral clip is real or invented, the sheer size of the audience for this kind of content tells you something true and worth paying attention to, regardless of what any chatbot actually said. Millions of people are hungry for something that feels like solid ground on questions of meaning, purpose, and belief, in a moment when trust in traditional institutions, whether religious, scientific, or media, is lower than it has been in a long time. That hunger is genuine, and it deserves to be taken seriously, even when the specific content feeding it does not deserve the same respect. The real story is not that a machine settled an ancient argument. The real story is how badly a huge number of people wanted it to, and what that tells us about the world we're actually living in right now. So here's the real question worth sitting with. Not whether a chatbot proved or disproved a 2,000-year-old miracle in a few paragraphs, but why so many of us were ready to believe it did, the moment we saw a confident-looking screenshot. What do you think? Does it matter whether an AI's answer on something like this is even genuine? As long as it makes people stop and think about the question seriously. Let me know in the comments if you want more videos that actually dig into what these viral AI stories get right and what they quietly leave out. Make sure you are subscribed, because there are a lot more of these to take apart.